Good morning and welcome to our daily devotional from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn and glad to have you with us on this June 1st, 2022, Wednesday, as we continue our look at the story of the Tower of Babel. So as I mentioned earlier this week, this passage from Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9, is one of the first stories following the story of the flood in Genesis, and it has an extraordinary symmetry to it, where verses 1 through 4 give us the perspective of the people who are building the city. Verse 5 is a kind of call for judgment, that is, that God is going to make an assessment of what the people are doing. And then verses 6 through 9 gives us the perspective of the Lord on this building project and the people. So this morning I would like for us to focus on verse 5, which is the so-called neutral verse in this passage. So I'm going to read verse 5 of chapter 11. This is Genesis chapter 11, verse 5, and then offer a couple of reflections on this verse. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. So there's a lot in this verse, particularly the phrase comes down. The Lord came down in the relation of God to humanity. No matter how great our accomplishments, God always descends to us. And this, of course, is not a spatial relationship. It's a spiritual relationship in which God is the presence of justice and righteousness, the standard for justice and righteousness, and the absolute judge of all relationships. So the character in this story that is called the Lord is not an ordinary character, not just another personality in the narrative. And this, of course, is essential to understanding the story, that is, understanding the relationship of God to the people. The descent, God's descent, tells us, too, that God is interested in creation. God is not a God who remains forever at distance and afar off, without interest in creation. God has an interest, and God is, of course, recognized in heaven as reigning without contest and without question. So heaven is that space and that place in which God is unquestioned, the unquestioned ruler. Here, God descends to begin an inquiry. And so the nature of God is such that all activity is subject to judicial review. All of the things which we do and say and the ways that we live are reviewed by God. Every act is understood and judged in the light of God's righteousness and justice. It is itself a just act. That is, this judging is itself a kind of just act because it's necessary in order for there to be anything like righteousness or justice or morality. There has to be some sense in which there is accountability for one's life and one's actions. And so this verse 5 of this story, expresses that, expresses the nature of justice and righteousness in relation to God, that God is the standard, that God is the judge, and that mortals do not play this sort of ultimate judging role. Let's close with this word of prayer. Eternal God, most real when most invisible, most near when we think thee far away, most clearly conceived when we acknowledge thee to be incomprehensible. Speak to us, not only from the past, but from the living present, not only from the awful silences, but in every tumultuous thought, not only from the clouds that veil thy heavenly throne, but from thine image graven on the heart of man. While our thoughts of thee grow wider, may we remember how vaster still thou art, and may we seek to grow more sensible of thy presence and to reflect thee more purely in our lives. Help us, O King of ages, in these changing times and these troubled days. Lose not care of us when we lose sight of thee. Still hold us fast when faith is feeble and knowledge is confused. If our thoughts of thee should grow doubtful and thine image within be dimmed, may we unconsciously fulfill thy will. Help us to remember that it is not to him that thinketh, but to him that doeth, that thy will is known. Help us to believe that thou abidest beyond all change and art always better than our highest hopes, greater than our noblest thoughts. Amen. Thank you for joining me this morning from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn, and I hope that you have a very good day. Goodbye.